everyone, it's been a while. I'm not putting as much effort into my setup as I usually would. If these poets can put so little effort into their poems, then I can also put little effort into my setup. Today I am going to be not really reviewing, but talking about some of the poetry books that I've bought or borrowed recently. Everyone already knows Rupi Kaur's poetry books, but I hadn't read them yet. I know that Rachel Oates posted a video a long time ago about her poetry, but I purposefully did not watch it because I actually wanted to read them for myself first, and it was not worth it. To be honest, I haven't been feeling like the best lately. I've had a lot of derealization episodes and more depression, and I always found that reading or watching things or reading poetry always pulled me out of it, but these books made me even more depressed. I have 4 books here that I want to talk about. The first one is FLUX by Orion Carloto. The second one is The First Pillow Thoughts by Courtney Peppernell. Then I have Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, and The Sun and Her Flowers, the second book of Rupi Kaur. The reason why I'm not doing a separate review on each of these is because I literally don't think I have enough to say about these to do one. I'm also just losing my patience with these. As you guys know, I like to read poetry books at least twice to be able to really give my honest opinions about them, because I feel that sometimes with poetry you just need to be in the right mindset. Especially for this book, Pillow Thoughts. The reason why this video took so long to make is because I really wanted to give this book a chance. Also, I picked up a super random book in a secondhand shop. This is so fun. It's an animal poems poetry collection book from different poets. Be sure to pick it up because it's a delight. I really like it. Normally I would have notes ready, I would have comparisons ready, I would compare some of the poems with some other poems inside the other books to see which ones approach some themes better, but honestly, it was already tiring enough to read through these books twice, and I just felt that all of them have the same problems. So at the end of this video, I will list up exactly what's wrong with all of these poetry books. Enough babbling, let's get into the video. I did not organize anything, so I'm not really sure how I'm gonna go about these. Let's start with the poem book Flux by Orion Carloto. The first time I read this one,
it was so boring.
And I actually did not know that she was a YouTuber, so then I looked her up. And I have to say that I actually really liked her content. It was very poetic. I think her content and her writing translates better if it's in a video format though, because these poems were really not my favorite and they were quite boring. I mean, they're not badly written or anything. Let's just take one. It's called Lucid Dreaming on page 54. I saw you in my dreams again. This time it felt more real than others. Your hands were gripped tightly around my jaw, or maybe it was just my covers. On page 53, A Coward's Lullaby. It's frightening because I learned more in your silence than I ever did in a time spent calling you mine. These are also just tweet-like things. On page 125, I gave him the moon and stars, but all he wants is space. I mean, can you see my mood slightly diminishing as I read more and more? The poem Missed Connection on page 169. I hung up the phone before you stuttered out the words I love you, so I wouldn't feel guilty when I would have to say it back. In all of these books, by the way, but especially in this one, I feel that she has a really good grasp on like interesting things, interesting thoughts, interesting themes, but she doesn't execute them in good poems. You know what I mean? Like every single time when I read a poem, I'm like, wow, this is a good subject, but it's not a poem. I'm not gonna read too many because the only stickers that I put are actually on poems that I kind of enjoyed, and there's barely any in them. It's not that it's badly written, it's just not something I would be able to call a poetry book. It's just like just call it a quotes collection or something, or interesting thought. But I do recommend you guys watching her channel because she does have some beautifully poetic videos that I enjoyed watching. But this poetry book is a no for me. Of all the ones that I've read, I wouldn't put this one in the bottom, but it's like very mediocre. There's worse to come. Next book, which is Pillow Thoughts by Courtney Peppernell. And what was interesting about this book is that it doesn't claim to be just a poetry book. On the back it says, Pillow Thoughts is a collection of poetry and prose about heartbreak, love, and raw emotions. It is divided into sections to read when you feel you need them most. Make a cup of tea and let yourself feel. Of the 4 books, Flux, Milk and Honey, and The Sun and Her Flowers, and Pillow Thoughts, I actually enjoyed this one the most, but only because I really gave it a shot. Because it said, well, it's not only poetry, it's also prose. Like, it recognizes that it's not only poems. I mean, there's barely any poems in here that could be categorized as a poem, but oh well. At least it knows, you know? The sections are, if you are dreaming of someone, if you are in love, if you are heartbroken, if you are lonely, sad, missing someone, if you need encouragement, if you are soul-searching, if you need a reason to stay, and these are for you. Knowing this, I felt that it would only be right to read some of these poems that she envisioned us to read them in. I waited until I felt those things, and I remembered to read some of the poems. And I have to say, honestly, this is what you would want someone to tell you. So I do appreciate the format this book is in, and that's why I don't think this one is the worst in here. I actually think I would recommend this one to you guys because it can really help you in those times when you feel these emotions, especially if you don't have anyone to talk to. Let's go to the section, if you are in love. I mean, I didn't like the poems, let's just be clear about that. For example, on page 37, of all the maps in the world, the only one I will follow is the map to your heart. Let's go to the section, because this one actually really helped me. If you are sad, is that why you play the music so loud? A beat to drown out the thoughts, sound so high you cannot think, lyrics so close to home you don't even blink. When I was sad, that really did resonate with me, so that was nice. Maybe in if you are heartbroken, I mean, I haven't felt this emotion recently because I'm in a very good relationship with Matthäus, as you guys know. If you want to see content that we make, you can go check out the second channel, Mat and PauPau. And there was a poem in here on page 53 that I actually kind of liked. Perhaps it's just easier to smile and pretend everything is fine, rather than admit my heart's a little swollen from losing something that wasn't even mine. It's nice, right? Like, if I read that when I was broken up with or something, if I had this book when I was broken up with, that would have made me cry, but like in a good way, you know, to like, you know, go through those emotions. I think this book does that really well. Page 59. Don't date broken girls, my mother said, but they deserve to be loved too. And so I loved a broken girl more than anything. I just didn't realize she would break me too. On page 70. All your senses are heightened when you are heartbroken. You hear things more clearly because it's better than listening to the drum of your heart. You feel the sun and the air on your skin because you are trying to feel things instead of shutting down. You smell their perfume everywhere. You still feel their fingers as though they are knotted through yours, and it makes you cry. I hope you can feel this. In Pillow Thoughts, there's a lot of very intimate, small moments that she enlarges to a piece of prose, and everyone who has gone through sadness, heartbreak, needs encouragement or whatever, these are good. So if you are someone who needs some encouragement every now and again, this poetry prose collection knows what it is. It knows that it's not only poems, it knows it's prose, and it actually has a purpose. It's actually inviting you to read the poems at a certain time, which I normally wouldn't agree with. I think you should be able to read a poem about sadness when you're happy and still feel that sadness inside. I think that's, you know, the mark of a really good poet. But at the same time, I really think that this book is self-aware, does not feel condescending, by the way, because a lot of these do. If you want to pick this one up, I don't think this is that bad. And now we've arrived at Rupi Kaur. Like, I don't even know where to start. You see all of these stickers. I had like thoughts for every single one of these stickers. I planned out multiple things. I wrote down multiple lists. I counted themes in this book as I usually do. I don't know, like it's constantly recycling the same thing. I have 2 post-its here on the starting page and I will just read them. I wrote, you do not need to make it relatable. I feel like this is a certain virus that's going around right now in the art world, that everything needs to be somewhat relatable. And I feel that if you make everything too relatable or try to make it as general as possible to appease the general public, it's not going to be as great. What would you prefer? Having most people be like, oh, I kind of like this, or a minority perhaps saying, I fucking love this? Second post-it says, if you want to, present us with situations that you had but are not about you. Let me first say this. I do commend Rupi Kaur that she wrote about such triggering subjects, about rape and about things that she went through. There's some very great themes in here, and I will never critique someone for that. specifically. I think that if she went through these and this helped her heal herself in a certain way, then I have nothing bad to say about that, of course. Everyone has their own mental journey and everyone needs to heal the way they want. So I'm not critiquing the themes, or I'm not critiquing what she went through. I would never do that. I'm critiquing the result, which is the book. I actually have a lot of thoughts, but I was scrolling around on Goodreads, where I keep my progress of all of the books I've read, and I found 2 comments that actually summarize everything that I was about to say but didn't know how to. The first comment is from Alafia, and she rated it 2 stars for the beautiful thoughts. So if I write my review like this, will it automatically become poetry? In my humble opinion, this book is composed of extremely beautifully written lines, but there are very few poems actually. I agree. It's the same problem as the other ones. There are some beautifully written lines, but it's not poetry. What I don't understand is why you have to click the enter key to make it look beautiful when you can continue the same line, same paragraph, same page. Also, why a published book gives no shits about capitalizing the I is beyond me. And this is something that's weird for non-English people, I guess, because when I first started learning English and I learned that the I is always capitalized when it's a subject, was weird to me. Because it's not like you write him or you with a capital letter, so it doesn't bother me that much. But because I'm so used to seeing the I capitalized, it also threw me off a little bit. Consider this line from Milk and Honey. You might not have been my first love, but you were the love that made all other loves seem irrelevant. Write it without clicking enter. You might not have been my first love, but you were the love that made all other loves seem irrelevant. It rolls better. It's better like that. And then she says, get what I'm saying? This is just a thought. I may be wrong. Perhaps this is poetry even without the rhymes. In my view, these are poetically written lines, not poetry. Some lines did sound genuinely like poetry, but a major chunk of the book didn't. Exactly. These are summed, not always, by the way. I don't think she writes that beautifully. I feel that in Flux, it's actually better. But anyways, I just hate all of the spaces. Not a single sentence is capitalized, which I don't understand why. There's no reason why it shouldn't. Why is that so edgy? Why is that seen as like poetic? I don't understand. That's exactly my thoughts. Thank you for voicing them like that. The second comment I want to read is so freaking funny. It's by Sophia. First of all, that profile picture of the duck and the knife, I fucking love it. She rated it 1 star, and she says, loves awkwardly, that just happened. If I had known I could write a best-selling book of poetry by putting random thoughts on blank paper and making them look pretty, I would be a millionaire by now. I don't understand the point of breaking sentences up like this for the sake of wasting paper and my time. There, was that poetry? Apparently. Milk and Honey is supposed to be inspiring and feminist, at least that's what I read in the synopsis. I picked it up because of the memes, but whatever. It wasn't inspiring and it wasn't meme-worthy either. I agree. And what Sophia does is she sometimes puts poems that she wrote herself in between here. I brought you ice cream, but you were lactose intolerant. And now I'm gonna read a poem by Rupi. You look at me and cry, everything hurts. I hold you and whisper, but everything can heal. Or, just a random other one, rivers fall from my mouth, tears my eyes can't carry. Another one, the thing worth holding on to would not have let go. I mean, number 69, it's your voice that undresses me. The only exception to this rule, because like all of her poetry is pretty boring, like exactly what Sophia says here. There's one on page 57 that I did like, kinda, and it's the very thought of you has my legs spread apart like an easel with a canvas begging for art. It's like almost good. A nice metaphor, but it could have been better. Sophia goes on, I think the most intriguing part of this book was actually the art, not the poetry. But the drawings by themselves are just fine, and the poetry by itself is just okay, and together they're pretty mediocre, but still, it's food for thought, I guess. I respectfully disagree with Sophia here. I'm just gonna show you guys an illustration. So, that one, right? And then another one in the other book. So Rupi drew the illustrations herself, she says so in the book, and I would have preferred her to actually hire a professional illustrator, because in Flux, Orion Carloto actually hired a professional illustrator. Katie Roberts is the illustrator of this book, and you can just see the difference in skill, can't you? Like another one is this one, which I really enjoyed. I mean, there's just more depth in them, and maybe like the poetry in this book isn't necessarily great or anything, but the drawings certainly do add something. They add depth, they add professional work And that's not the case in Rupi Kaur's books. I'm sorry, it's just ugly line art. I don't like it. I mean, look at this. Very inspiring. And then Sophia goes on, you gave me an apple and I threw it at your face. Overall, I thought this was a really gimmicky book of poems. It was just an artistic way of scribbling that I felt was contrived instead of beautiful. Exactly, beautifully put. It's scribbles, it's quotes. There's nothing wrong with identifying what the book is actually about. They are scribbles. They are, as we call it in Dutch, hersenspinsels, which translates literally to thought weavings, mind weavings. Is that a word in English? I don't know. And Sophia ends with, I stayed at a bed and breakfast. The room had no bed, but they still brought me an egg. I mean, if I read a poem in her second book, tell them I was the warmest place you knew and you turned me cold. Another one, what draws you to her? Tell me what you like so I can practice. Or, I will welcome a partner who is my equal. Is there a difference? No, I can't tell. There is one poem in the first book that I do want to read out to you because it's an example of what could have been or a good start and that should have been improved upon. On page 97. Did you think I was a city big enough for a weekend getaway? I am the town surrounding it, the one you've never heard of, but always pass through. There are no neon lights here, no skyscrapers or statues, but there is thunder, for I make bridges tremble. I am not street meat, I am homemade jam, thick enough to cut the sweetest thing your lips will touch. I am not police sirens, I am the crackle of a fireplace. I'd burn you, and you still couldn't take your eyes off me, 'cause I'd look so beautiful doing it you'd blush. I'm not a hotel room, I am home. I am not the whiskey you want, I am the water you need. Don't come here with expectations and try to make a vacation out of me. This was one of the only poems that I thought that she kind of used a metaphor in. I especially like the beginning. Did you think I was a city big enough for a weekend getaway? I am the town surrounding it that you've never heard of, but always passed through. That's a very nice metaphor. I think this should have been improved upon because it actually made me envision something. It's very relatable, I guess. And it uses more imagery. It uses tangible things to describe the intangible, which we learned in my first poetry video that's, a technique that you should use. I put a red sticker on page 88 because it's actually one of the worst things in here and it's so entitled. Like the vibe of the poem just doesn't work for me. The woman who comes after me will be a bootleg version of who I am. She will try and write poems for you to erase the ones I've left memorized on your lips, but her lines could never punch you in the stomach the way mine did. Where are those? Could you also include them in your poetry books, please? She will then try to make love to your body, but she will never lick, caress, or suck like me. She will be a sad replacement of the woman you let slip. Nothing she does will excite you, and this will break her. When she is tired of falling apart for a man that doesn't give back what he takes, she will recognize me in your eyelids staring at her with pity, and it'll hit her. How can she love a man who is busy loving someone he can never get his hands on again? See, that last sentence really confuses me, because you're complaining that the next woman will be a bootleg version of you, right? So I think in the beginning you're mad because he broke up with you and now there's a new woman or something. And then in the end you're saying that he's still in love with you. So that means that you broke up with him. I don't understand. You could argue that Pillow Thoughts also does this, like these prose things. But I feel that it's done way better. Like for example, on page 65, I picked up all your things and I put them in a box. I was going to send them back to you, all those things you gave me, when you promised I was the only thing you needed. And then I realized I can't put every kiss in the box or return every I love you. I can't return every time I held you or unwrite every love letter I wrote you. I can't undo every time I touched you or unhear the way you said my name. I can't send back every you're beautiful because things will never be the same. What am I gonna do with all these things if I can never pack them away? Courtney hones in on a certain aspect of heartbreak and she makes a complete poem about it. And this was, it's not the best poem. The format is not what it's supposed to be. I feel like this could have been improved. This is I think the third draft of this one. Fourth draft would have made it amazing in my opinion. But you see the difference. I feel that in Milk and Honey, it doesn't even read nicely. There's no punctuation, no commas, nothing, and it's just not nice to read. So I think if people would make the comparison between this and Pillow Thoughts, which the title already kind of hints at that these are shower thoughts or pillow thoughts or whatever, it's not the same. I feel that it's still worse than the pillow thoughts. Yeah, I just put a sticker next to this one with the word lol on it because I thought it was so funny. It's on page 202. Your art is not about how many people like your work. Your art is about if your heart likes your work, if your soul likes your work. It's about how honest you are with yourself, and you must never trade honesty for relatability. And then to all young poets. After reading all of the other poems, because it's like nearing the end of the book, I was like, the audacity. The Sun and Her Flowers. Let's do this quickly, shall we? There are some very interesting things in this. There's not a lot of themes because I actually counted the themes in these books and there's not a lot. But in The Sun and Her Flowers, she talks a little bit more about her family and specifically about her mother. And this poem on page 123 is actually quite nice. Leaving her country was not easy for my mother. I still catch her searching for it in foreign films and the international food aisle. That's such an interesting idea. It's such an interesting concept. See, this is what I mean. Like, there's so many interesting things in here. Like, the first commenter on Goodreads said it's brilliant ideas, nice thoughts, but it's not poetry. What else? On page 179, I still want to read you guys this one. It has like a weird illustration. And the poem is just, I am made of water, of course I am emotional. Do we have like PTSD to Gabbie Hanna's poem about like, what's it like, trust issues or something? I'm made of 70% water, that's why I have trust issues. Is there anything else that I can say about these? I mean, I don't want to, but... Oh yeah, here, this also has Gabbie Hanna vibes. Page 217. Even if they've been separated, they'll end up together. You can't keep lovers apart, no matter how much I pluck and pull them. My eyebrows always find their way back to each other. Unibrow. This has energy of the misleading poem of Gabbie Hanna, which is called Cut or Snip, I think Cut. Just to reiterate, if I had to rank these 4 books, I would say Pillow Thoughts is the best one, after which comes Flux, after which Milk and Honey, and the last one is The Sun and Her Flowers. Although I'm actually doubting whether to put The Sun and Her Flowers and Milk and Honey. You can just interchange them because I don't like either of them. Man, I'm feeling so drained and so tired talking about these, having to read these again. And I just want to like show you guys an example of poetry that actually moves me. I picked this up recently. It's a book just called Animal Poems. It's a collection of poetry throughout the ages by different poets. So they're all using metaphors, using animals. It's a BBC Books thing. I bought this for €2 at like a secondhand bookshop. And anything that's in here is 1,000,000 times to 1,000,000,000,000 times better to anything in these 4 books. I mean, it's not surprising because these are actually good poets. But let me just read some out to you. I'm already getting excited reading. You will see the change in my attitude probably as well, because when I read poetry, it's just nice. First one is called The Duck on page 29. Behold the duck. It does not cluck. A cluck it lacks. It quacks. It is especially fond of a puddle or pond. When it dines or sups, it bottoms ups. This is just a funny, cute poem. It's not trying to be super, super deep, but even a poem about something so menial and stupid as a duck can make me smile. Second one I'm gonna read is called Upon a Snail by John Bunyan? She goes but softly, but she goeth sure. She stumbles not, as stronger creatures do. Her journey's shorter, so she may endure, better than they which do much further go. She makes no noise, but silly seizeth on the flower or herb appointed for her food, the which she quietly doth feed upon, while others range and glare, but find no good. And though she doth but very softly go, however slow her pace be, yet 'tis sure, and certainly they that do travel so, the prize which they do aim at, they procure. This is a very interesting poem because it's literally about a snail and her journey to find food, comparing her to other animals that do it way quicker or way easier, but also get, disappointed a lot. I feel that this poem is a good example of like, on the surface it doesn't seem like much, but if you actually think about it, there's a lot behind it. I feel that especially the last part, and though she doth but very softly go, however slow her pace be, yet 'tis sure. That says like, okay, in life, if you're not as talented or if you do not study as quickly or as easily as others in your class, for example, The goal is still the same, and you will get there, even if it's slower than all the rest. Everyone works towards the same goal, and if you are a snail, that's fine. Because other people might be too fast or search too hard and get disappointed too often because they try so many different things because they're quicker maybe. But you, because you're focused on the goal and you're working towards it on your own pace, you're sure to reach it because you're putting that much time and effort into it. And this is what I mean. Your subject of the poem doesn't need to be you or me or I. And this brings me back to the poems of Rupi Kaur. I want to kind of challenge her or anyone who is doing poems like this to write a poem about love, heartbreak or something without the words you, I, me, we, and love in it. My original idea was to count the poems that had those words in it. I started counting, and at page like 100, I still hadn't seen any poems that didn't have those words in it. Almost all of them have those words in it. And it's boring after a while. The subject of your poems does not change. Another poem that I want to read, to stay on the topics of snails, I also have another poem. This one is by James Fenton. It's called The Killer Snails. The killer snails have slung their silver trails along the doormat, out across the lawn, under the bushes where the alarming thrushes give night its notice, making way for dawn, and the obliging lizards drop their tails. On webs of dew, the spiders steer their pots of glue and drag their quartered victims to the shade. Soaking in their rugs of grass and moss, the slugs wind up another night of sluggish trade, and young ingredients get into a stew. The sorrel bends. The path fades out but never ends. Where brambles clutch and bracken wipes your feet, it goes in rings. Its minds on other things. Its way and its intentions never meet. Meetings of friends? It gives no undertaking. It depends. This poem is very fun. Why? Because I actually don't really know what this is about. I have 7 different interpretations of what this may mean, but I have no idea. I feel that there's certain steps to poetry. The first one is you gotta pull me in with your rhythm, song-like writing, and your beautiful vocabulary. That's first. Second is it needs to be an interesting subject or something that I can envision second hand. And the third thing is, if it's interesting to talk about with someone else who has a different interpretation, that is amazing. Like, you don't have to spell it all out for me. I'm gonna come back to this as well later in my final thoughts because I have a good example of that. You do not need to make everything overtly clear. I can have a certain interpretation of this poem and someone else might have another. And I'm sure that the writer intended a certain meaning, but isn't it interesting if you have people thinking about it and finding their own meanings in it? Comment down below if you know if you have a certain idea of what this poem is trying to convey, because I have no idea, and that interests me. I'm still talking about it and I'm still thinking about it because it intrigues me. The next poem is called The Fly. This one is by William Blake. Little fly, thy summer's play, my thoughtless hand has brushed away. Am not I a fly like thee, or art not thou a man like me? For I dance and drink and sing, till some blind hand shall brush my wing. If thought is life and strength and breath, and the want of thought is death, then am I a happy fly, if I live or if I die. This is so insanely deep, and he's using a stupid fly as a metaphor. Another poem is by Robert Frost, a very well-known poet. The way a crow shook down on me, the dust of snow from a hemlock tree, has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. He's dreading a very bad day or a very bad moment, and sometimes something can like shake you awake. A certain small moment. Here it is a crow that shakes down the dust of snow on him from a tree. This is so well done. It's like a certain feeling, and you can envision it, and it's simple, but it's effective. It's just literally snapping out of something. That's the theme. I put on makeup and put an actual effort into my appearance for this part of the video because this poet deserves my attention and my effort. And it's none other than Edgar Allan Poe with his poem, The Raven. It's a very long poem though. I'm not going to read everything to you, but I feel the feeling that I have with Edgar Allan Poe is his poetry is like the metal of poetry. I can almost feel the double bass when I'm reading these poems. I get very passionate when I'm reading these, so if that is kind of weird. I'm sorry, I really can't help it. So I will read like the first paragraph and the last 3 maybe. So, okay, this is The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow from the lost Lenore. For the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aden it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul had spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart and take thy form from off my door, quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. This poem is... It gives me chills every time I read it, and it's such a sad story. This poetry book, I genuinely recommend it. It's so fun. Each and every single poem has something. It's great. Like, I can already feel my spirit has been lifted. This book really got me out of the dip that I was in, and I really love it. When my camera was charging, I actually had some extra time to think, and I wrote down some thoughts on these sticky notes that I still want to convey to you. So these are my final thoughts on, poetry and what I've learned and what I want you guys to remember. The first thing is that I feel that these poets, in my opinion, don't understand that in poetry, at least for me, the format is as important as the content. If you have a neat idea, congratulations, but now the work starts. It's okay to just have a neat idea and write that down and bam, you have poetry. But that's not the case at all. It would be like a painter that has an amazing idea, takes a brush with black ink, and on his canvas just writes the idea of like a fruit bowl with rotten fruit. And he doesn't actually paint it in a way that actually makes you feel something. That's kind of what I think a lot of these poems are. You have the idea, you have the theme, now work on it. This is where it starts in poetry, right? There is a reason why it's different from prose. You have an idea, and then you have the format that gives an amazing way to convey that idea. And if you don't want to put effort into these things, that's fine, then just write prose or quotes or scrabbles or dribbles. Call it what it is, not poetry, but just prose. I also wanted to remark that, again, although I appreciate people writing about very heavy subjects that are traumatic and that they show us that they're working through it, I will never talk bad about that. But what I have noticed is that people think that if you have a heavy subject, that automatically means that it's art or that you should put less effort into what you're writing because the subject is so triggering or so insanely heavy that you think that the idea in itself is art. And I completely disagree. In this case, if you're writing about a heavy subject, the format and execution is even more important in my eyes. If you already trigger your readers before you've actually had the chance to convey a certain emotion, if they're too triggered, it won't land. Using a sort of metaphor or using a technique that will make us feel or realize that it's about something very heavy. And that is way more effective than just saying literally what you want to say. Also, I feel that you should put more emphasis on the format and the execution because you should have respect for the heavy subject. And I feel that just writing this shit down lacks respect for the subject. Third point I want to talk about is nowadays people are very concerned with breaking the norm or like breaking the format that's been accepted for a while. And they say that if you're constantly biased by... One second. Not sure if you can hear that, but there's like a lot of... I think it's a wedding. It's a wedding. Yeah, it's a wedding. So about breaking the norm. People say that you cannot be too biased by what came before if you want to do something new. And although I agree with that, I feel that you're missing some steps, because I feel that you need to show some skill before you can have the audacity to claim that you're breaking the norm or to claim that you're being new and refreshing and exciting. What do you need to show some skill? You need practice. You need research. You need references. You need to know what the format is before you can break it. And I feel in these books, all 4 of them, maybe with the exception of some poems here and there, it's very obvious that they don't know the foundation that's already there. And I'm not saying that everyone should write in a certain way with poetry, but I wrote to you a few poems in this book and there were so many different techniques, there were so many different ways to go about it. And were you bored? No. But when I read all of these books, I was bored out of my mind. So the steps are, you become skillful by practicing, researching, then you make sure that you master that format, and then you can have the audacity to break format. And language is so important. On the topic of language, the reason why poetry is so interesting in my eyes and why I love language, poetry is a playful art form with language, which is pretty rigid at times. And you don't have video, you don't have sound effects, you have nothing like that. The only thing that you have is words, ink on a page, and that's it. They can make images dance in your head, and you don't need illustrations for that, by the way. I do appreciate that in Pillow Thoughts there's almost no illustrations, because for the other 3 books the illustrations sometimes got in the way of what I was envisioning. Us humans have the ability to link unrelated subjects, images, words to each other. For example, the poem that I read to you about the fly, it's literally about a fucking fly. And the poem makes us think about life and death and the meaning of life. That's insane. We as humans can make neurological links between words, images, sounds, smells, everything. This is so exciting. And I don't get excited from these 4 books. They don't excite me, and they're obviously not trying to, or they fail at trying to. That's why poetry helps me personally in life, because it helps me make those neurological bridges between a certain subject that I'm having trouble with thinking about or placing in my life. And poems sometimes can make me have epiphanies and make me see those bridges, because thinking by yourself is nice, but it's nice to have some help every now and again. And that's why also that I thought Pillow Thoughts was actually the best book in this, because it actually tries to give you those neurological bridges that you need in your time of sorrow or happiness or whatever. And then I have an example that I wanted to give you. In my first poetry video, I've talked about Bo Burnham's poetry and compared it to Gabbie Hanna. I've seen a lot of people nowadays reacting to the song Welcome to the Internet, which is super ironic, by the way, because in his show Inside, he literally takes the piss at people reacting to stuff. Welcome to the Internet is a song that talks about a lot at the same time. I just tried to rewrite the song in a stupid poem that will show you the difference of effect. So if you haven't seen or heard the song Welcome to the Internet, listen to that first and then come back here. So I would just have written like in the style of Rupi Kaur or someone else. People have no attention span. They need everything at once. They want a tutorial of a bomb next to a DIY flower cake for your mom. Ta-da! Am I a millionaire now? You will hear that in his song he did so much research and there's so many details in it because he did his research, obviously, or he's just very intelligent and knows what to put it in songs. Like a god. Then in his chorus, he says, could I interest you in everything all of the time? A little bit of everything all of the time. Apathy is a tragedy and boredom is a crime. Anything and everything all of the time. He's not saying you have a short attention span. And I'm complaining about the internet because people don't appreciate anything anymore. I know I'm talking about Bo Burnham a lot. He's not the only one that I listen to or his poetry is not the only poetry that I read. It's just a very easy example to give because I feel that he's very famous right now. What I just want to say to all of these writers is stop hopping on the poetry train if it's not poetry. I feel that they're naming these books poetry books so that poetry lovers would read them. Whereas if they would call them quotes, a collection of quotes or a collection of drabbles, I think less people would buy them. And poetry has a very trendy name, and people that love poetry would probably also buy this. And I'm just very tired of it. Now, I'm not sure if these poets actually intended or any of this. I'm sure they had good intentions, but I am not a consumer. I don't consume very apathically or passively. I am a client, I am a customer, I'm someone that reads your poetry, and take me and other people that review your poetry as customer feedback, because that's what it is, and then try better. Okay, I've been talking a while now. I hope I said everything I wanted to say. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry if this format wasn't as interesting as the other videos. I will try better in the future. But so let me know if there's any other poetry books that you would like me to review, or any movies or any series. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope I will see you next time. Bye bye!